Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the No Name Music Cast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And once again, thank you, everybody, for listening to our podcast. We make this podcast completely independently. We're not with Stitcher or Wondery or anything like that. We make this ourselves and publish it ourselves. So if you're listening to this, thank you. Thank you for supporting us, and thank you for supporting independent podcasts. We appreciate it.
We take indie podcasts about as serious as it can get, y'all. There ain't nobody back at this.
Well, you never know. I mean, you know, we have more listeners than I thought we would ever get, to be fair.
Did too.
And then, you know, at some point we might run ads, or we might do a Patreon or something along those lines. But for now, we'll carry on as we are, and just thank you for listening. We do appreciate it.
We're here for the fun.
There we are. That's exactly why we do it. Okay, so we always start our episodes with a tip of the week, tip of the day. And Joy, I think you have one. Over to you.
Okay, so my tip of the week, tip of the day, tip of whatever is when you work for a company that works in many states and you have to take in prospective time zones when doing interviews, there's another thing you might need. So I had 4 interviews set up for Missouri this week of hiring a receptionist, right, Tim?
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? Did not happen. Not one of those interviews happened today because a tornado touched down in that area and nobody had power.
Oh, no.
So terrible. My tip is maybe follow the local weather when you're scheduling your interviews. I had to text all of them, and most of them were like, oh, I'm just hiding in a basement. Sorry, I can't get a hold of you.
Oh, dear.
They're all fine. Apparently it did actually. But I mean, Missouri's in Tornado Alley in America, for people who don't know. It's very common, very flat area for them to have tornadoes. But I had saw something, a headline in our chat, and I saw this, that they were closing our Missouri Center, that day. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think much about it. And then I'm like, why is everybody ghosting me? So then I have we use Dialpad. I don't know if you've heard of it, Tim, but you can send text messages through it. They're like an alternate number and stuff.
Okay.
They don't get your personal number. It's just a phone system. And so I started texting them, and they're like, yeah, I don't have internet. Yeah, I'm in a basement. There's a bunch of sirens going off. And I was like, okay, well, we can reschedule. Don't worry. So I told them all just to text me in the morning, once they have their power back and stuff. But it was like, note to self, when you're going to schedule these interviews, you might do a little bit more looking.
I mean, I interview people, but the thing is, I interview people who are local, who, even if it's done with a WebEx or Zoom type thing, they're going to be local or, 50 miles away. But yeah, you think like doing it across the country, various different states, time zones, the whole thing. You don't think that there might be a tornado or I don't know, some kind of snow event, or who knows what's going on.
This is definitely, Tim can testify, not my first rodeo hiring. I've been at HR since, 7-8 years now, but it's my first rodeo hiring, not internationally, like interstately, whatever you call it.
Interstately. Yeah, interstately. Is that what they call it?
That's what they call it. Nationally. So like, I'm pretty good at knowing time zones just because I lived in Utah and I've lived a few other states. So, I mean, I know what time zones are, even though I do have the world clock up on my computer at all times. But yeah, I was just like, I'm like, okay, this is the 3rd interview that no one has showed up to. What is happening? And then I started writing them, and they're like, so there is a tornado by my house. I'm like, oh, okay, well, we'll reschedule. So that's my tip of the day.
Well, there we are. Well, my tip is that, how can I put this? If you have access to some media, and it's old media, if it's a Betamax tape, if it's a VHS tape, if it's a cassette tape, if it's something old and you have access to it, archive it, digitize it, because you may never be able to find the equipment to play it back. So now is the time to do it. If you have access to something or someone's giving you something, digitize it and get that done, because 10, 15, 20 years from now, you might not be able to find a cassette deck or a High 8 or a DAT deck or something like that.
And they're so expensive. Charlie, my husband who buys and sells, he sold a DVD VHS, Tim, like combo player he found at a thrift store for like $300. But he got for like $30. It's insane.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And the reason I say that is an old friend of mine contacted me out of the blue from England, and he had a box of mini discs from the Red Lion Twickenham Jam session, which is something I used to go to many, many years ago, mid-90s, late 90s, that kind of thing, and asked me, was I interested and did I want them? And I was like, yes, of course I do. This is stuff I don't have in my archive, and I'd be really interested to find out what's on them. So he sent me a box of mini discs. Now, Joy, do you know what mini discs are?
Only because you've explained it on the podcast. I've never seen one physically, I don't think.
Well, I'm showing Joy a mini disc.
Looks like a floppy disk, basically.
Well, it is. It's that big.
Yeah.
That's a CD, and that's a mini disc.
So it comes out of the case. It's just a small little disc, right?
Well, it's in the plastic, and when you put it in the player, that shutter comes back. And this was a recordable format, sort of from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, I suppose. Sony came up with it, and it was their replacement for the cassette tape.
It's very floppy diskist. I got it. Okay.
Yeah, but it's a solid type thing. And it wasn't very popular at retail. You could get some pre-recorded albums on mini disc, but it was not really a thing. But a lot of musicians caught on to this because it was very easy to record concerts and record practices and things like that. And the players themselves are not much bigger than this.
Makes sense.
So I had to buy a mini disc deck to make this work. I had a mini disc deck and it failed, and I had to buy another one. I paid $120 for a 21-year-old mini disc deck.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, based on, like I'm telling you, Charlie, when we go to thrift shops, his eyes, they keen right in on those, Tim, because he's like, that's worth money. I was like, nah, you know what I mean? And he said his research. Like, I'm telling you guys, he bought a literal VHS, like DVD combo thing, flipped it for $300, Tim.
Yeah.
What in the world?
Yeah, and that's why, because people are finding old VHS tapes and old recordings, and they are digitizing them. So as I said, my advice to you, if you have access to this stuff, now is the time to do it. Get it digitized, get it preserved, put it in your Google Drive, put it in your backup drive. Let Grandma
leave it to you in the will.
Yeah. And likewise, if you have old photographs, get them scanned in, get them into your Google Pictures, get them into your Amazon Prime Pictures or whatever. Just get that stuff preserved, because you don't know when the pictures are going to get water damage. You don't know when these drives and things are going to fail. So do it.
And to be fair, as someone who grew up in a house where their house burned down one time, lost a lot of photos. So you don't, and I don't want to make that sound negative, but Tim's right. You don't know what could happen.
Exactly. So that's my tip for you. If you have access to old media, get it preserved, get it digitized, and it'll be there forever, because your VHS tape, your mini disc, your picture, your cassette tape, not only it may fail or deteriorate, there may be nothing to play it back on in the future.
Plus, if you need a kidney and you can afford it, you might be able to sell it in 10 years.
Maybe. I mean, I'm hoping.
Tim's face when you go, I said that was like, really, Joy?
I mean, I'm hoping that when I've done this archiving project, my $120 20-plus-year-old minidisc deck is going to go straight back on eBay and get sold for what I paid for it. That's assuming it lasts, because I have a whole box of these things, and each one is like 2 hours long. So I'm hoping it's going to last that long. We keep our fingers crossed.
Well, as a twin, I always have a really good donor. Somebody who could donate me a kidney. She's automatically a match. So I guess I won't have to sell my stuff.
There we go. I'm just planning on selling some old electronics, but whatever you get up to, Joy, is your own business.
I'm kidding. Joy, stop buying kidneys on the black market, everybody. All right. Anyway.
There we go. All right. So I'm just going to do a quick CD of the week for our friends who listen to our podcast and for our YouTube subscribers. And thank you if you are connected up to our YouTube empire. At the moment, we're just putting our CD of the weeks up there. We may expand that. We don't know. We might do some other fun stuff. Who can say? But there we go. Anyhow, this week's CD of the week is War of the Worlds, Jeff Wayne's version of War of the Worlds. Now, Joy, are you familiar with this album?
Yes, and the history of War of the Worlds.
Yeah, so this is like, I think the exact is Jeff Wayne's musical version of War of the Worlds. And it's from the 70s. It's like late 70s. I'm trying to find the date, but I need new glasses, Joy.
And Tim's showing his age, guys. He's doing that old person thing where you move it back and forth to see the time.
Needless to say, this is from like the 70s or something. That's close enough because, I mean, you can't see. I mean, that print is so small.
That's tiny. I'm just giving him a hard time.
But this is absolutely fantastic. It's something that was in our house growing up that my parents had. And like later on, they bought the CD of it. And in fact, this CD I have was actually my mum and dad's CD. They gave it to me. And this is just so good. I mean, it has Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy. He sings on it as well. And it has Justin Hayward, who's the guy from the Moody Blues, is on it as well.
I've heard pieces of it, but I haven't listened to it in a long time. I probably should go back.
Yeah, it has David Essex on it. And it also has Chris Thompson doing Thunderchild, which is a great track on here. The interesting thing about this for me is it's all based around Woking area and like Guildford and stuff. All the places that they mention in that are, is it Horsham?
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, Horsham. Is it Horsham or Horsell Common or whatever the words are? I know someone is shouting at their car radio because I can't remember what it's called.
Well, I said, halfway through Tim's train of thought off, but I was thinking to myself, I guess those would be places Tim would know. Didn't dawn on me that would relate to you.
Yeah.
Everybody saw Tim Paul's like, what is she going to say?
But musically, this is absolutely fantastic, and I highly recommend this. So buy it, stream it, or whatever. But it's really good, and I was lucky. It was probably 2009, 2010, something about that. Me and my friend Paul Hogg from Rough Justice, we went to Cardiff and we saw this being performed live. And he had really good seats. We was about the third or the fourth row from the front. And we drove to Wales because to go to see the show because that's where he had the tickets at. And this was absolutely amazing. And Jeff Wayne was there. He was conducting the orchestra. And Justin Hayward was on that gig. Absolutely fantastic. And, it made me love this even more having seen it live.
That makes sense, though, because that's one of those albums that's one of those ones that paints a big picture. We've talked about like those albums like that. I bet my husband Charlie would love that for that reason. You just gave me that idea. All right, Tim. So as I always ask you during CD of the Week, which top 3 songs would you tell our listeners to find? Okay,
so I should find the track listing, really. But certainly Forever Autumn, which is that was actually a single at the time.
Yeah.
And that's the one that Justin Hayward sings. And people who don't know this album probably know Forever Autumn.
I would say so. That's probably the most famous track I'm aware of.
Yeah. Thunderchild, which is the one that's sung by Chris Thompson. That is an absolutely fantastic track. And probably the opening, Eve of the War, which is like the overture of the whole thing. And that is superb. And that's a ba-ba-bam, ba-ba-bam, and all
you
that
could
business.
totally make that into almost like an opera if you wanted to. You could make that whole soundtrack, I feel like, into an opera, and it would be really cool.
Sure. And, it is a whole story. The whole thing follows the story of War of the Worlds from beginning to end. It's not just a collection of songs or a soundtrack.
That's what I'm saying, though.
Thing.
Like, if you put like an opera, like an actual opera cast with the music, they could play each piece out. It would make a really cool opera.
Yes, absolutely.
No one take that and go make money off my ideas. This is recorded for the internet. I will find you.
There we are. Well, my thing is, Joy, sometimes the internet does come for you. So
they do. We've had this conversation. I'm worried that I'm going to get canceled. I'll be part of cancel culture before you know it. All right.
Well, there we go. CD of the Week, Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. Okay, so this week's topic is Joy's topic. Now, she did give me a little bit of homework. She only gave me a couple of days to complete this homework and told me I didn't actually have to take any notes. But I'm going to hand it over to Joy, and she's going to explain the topic of the week.
So I have been debating the topic until up to like 2 days ago, which informs why Tim got such a delayed request. But these are songs that I think Tim is fairly familiar with. So that just go back and give them a listen. If there's ones on them you haven't heard, just pay attention. Because if I were the only one talking about this is going to be a very boring episode. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't know if Tim picked up on this, but every song that I gave him was sung by a woman. Kind of because it was all women.
Yes, 100%.
So we joke about like country on here. I'm not a huge country fan, especially modern day country, but there's a very specific type of female country music that I like from the 90s. And that is what this is. So it's like literally just ladies of the 90s country, I guess, or something along those lines. So I gave Tim a list of 10 songs to listen to. How familiar with some of these songs were you? Obviously, Shania Twain, I know you're going to know, but outside of that.
Yep, I knew the Shania Twain song, and I knew the Dixie Chicks song.
Okay.
Or the Chicks, or however they're called.
They're the Chicks now, yeah.
They're the Chicks, but at the time when this song was published, they were the Dixie Chicks.
I say the Dixie Chicks all the time, and then I'm like, nope, they're the Chicks. All right.
Yeah. And really, they were the only two that I knew. However, if I can just give you my comments on this that's nothing related to music.
Okay.
Well, it's sort of related to music, but my first takeaway is I didn't have these songs in my own library. So I had pulled them up on YouTube, and I made a YouTube playlist so I could listen to them a few times. All of them, I think, have red hair. All of them, or strawberry blonde, but all of them have some kind of reddish tinge to their hair.
Besides Shania.
Yeah, but mind you, the picture I have of Shania from that album cover, the light behind it is reddish. It's not blonde, it's maybe strawberry blonde.
It was a thing at the time, Tim. Gosh.
Okay. The other thing, apart from Reba, all of them had big, poofy, massive hair, and I'm sure there was about 3 cans of hairspray to get that look.
And they had double bangs. Like it was, I love it because like in the 90s, all the women had like the bangs that went up and down. You know what I'm talking about, Tim, on both sides.
Yeah. And in fact, I'm looking at the album artwork on here on my playlist, and that's exactly as you describe.
Yeah. It was the time, man. It was a time frame.
And the other thing I noticed with the lyrics from these songs, it's mostly they are complaining about men who've done them wrong or how they are significantly better than the men that done them wrong.
So what Tim is telling you is Joy's favorite type of country is songs where people are telling off men or saying they're better than men. Shocking. Who would have guessed it? And that's exactly why I picked every single one of these songs. So,
and if I could give you one other takeaway, is that the guitar playing on this stuff is superb.
So
absolutely
good.
Superb. I don't know whether they were Nashville session guys, whether they were members of their band or whatever, but as I was sitting back and listening to it and the guitar breaks were happening, I was like, this is good stuff.
Well, I can tell you Jody Messina did her own. That's the only one I can tell you for sure is probably playing the guitar. So just so you know, Jody Messina is a great guitarist.
Oh, well, there you go.
There you go. So now I gave you guys he gave you guys some names. So the first one, and this one, I swear you've probably heard it. So this person made it on here twice, but she was in a band and then she was a solo artist. The first one is Wynonna Judd's No One Else on Earth, which was which a lot of these, I think, Tim, people are going to know because they were cross pop over hits. Pop over hits? Was that? That didn't say that. Pop crossover hit.
Pop crossover hits.
What the British guy said. All right. It always sounds better at saying that I do. So I love this genre. And I would say Wynonna Judd, I listened to this song. You know, we've joked, Tim, about like those one songs where you go on like a tangent and you listen to it nonstop for like 6 months or something. This has been that song for me right now. It has been that song for me. And this was probably the whole motivation for this episode. So like Tim said, what she's talking about in the song is, you know, she's got her fences, she keeps them, but then this one guy breaks through and breaks her heart, right? But Wynonna Judd's voice, man, that woman can sing. Have you heard of her? Have you ever heard of her and the Judd sisters before this, Tim, or even knew about them? No, Judd, mother and daughter, actually.
Well, I've heard of the name Wynonna Judd, but when I pulled up the track, I'd never heard her perform. And in fact, when I saw the picture, it's not someone I would even recognize, apart from her strawberry blonde hair and lots of hairspray and lots of hair.
She's got the bangs really going for her. So what did you, I know didn't tell you to note this, but what did you think? Did you like the songs, or were you just like, wow, the guitar playing is really good and that's really all you took?
I like the songs. As I said, my takeaway was the guitar playing, because there's a lot of great playing on this stuff. And what is the era of these?
This was 1992 when this song came out.
Okay, so it was before what they call now bro country was a thing. And it's sort of a follow-on from classic country, but it's starting to have those sort of 80s and 90s pop influences in there. So you still have the steel guitar, you still have the banjo, you still have a country kind of twang to the singer's voice, but it's beginning to change a little bit away from what you would consider classic country. And with classic female country, it's like Dolly Parton and Tammy Wynette and that kind of stuff.
And there's this guy, his name is, or this guy, it's a girl. Her name is Jill, and her last name is like Colucci. I don't know how to say it. She's really known for, in the early 90s, writing that kind of music. So she co-wrote most of these songs. She did the score for the film Mystic Pizza. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie. I never watched it, but Charlie thinks it's a great movie. I couldn't tell you what it was. But she co-wrote I'm Gonna Be Somebody Anymore by Travis Tritt, No One Else on Earth by Winona Judd. And she was just very famous during that industry at that time. So that sound you're hearing, she plays the vocals, and I think she plays the vocals. And yeah, she plays them. That's what she does. She does the vocals and she's a guitarist. I don't know if she's the person, playing on this specific, but she does play the guitar. And so she's known for that kind of thing right around there that time. And she even did the theme song for America's Funniest Home Videos. I thought that was kind of cool. So there you go.
You find that a lot, though, that people who you don't think have written stuff that you would think it doesn't make any sense. Like, for example, The Love Boat. Have you ever seen The Love Boat?
Yes, my mom loved The Love Boat.
Yeah, and I've actually been trying to find every episode of The Love Boat because I feel I need to get involved with it, because I've seen the guest characters in The Love Boat and I'm like, this is completely my era. I know all these people. How can I get involved with The Love Boat? And I found it. It's on Peacock and you have to subscribe. And I may do that when I'm finished watching Mythbusters or something.
Gives you a free trial, Tim.
Yeah. But anyhow, the theme tune to The Love Boat was written by little Enos Burdett from Smokey and the Bandit. You know in Smokey and the Bandit, you have the big guy and the small guy who give Burt Reynolds the bet to drive to Texarkana and get the beer and everything. Little Enos.
Yeah.
I think it's Paul Williams, I believe his name is.
Yeah.
He wrote the theme to The Love Boat. I mean, what's that all about?
I mean, that is so random, though. You wouldn't even... And, no one would probably even... I don't know. Nobody would even know. No one would never even hear his name, think of him again. Like, I would never... He walked down the street. I wouldn't know who he was.
No. I mean, I know him from Smokey and the Bandit. I assume he's still with us, and I hope he's still with us, but... Equally, I mean, he's probably an older gentleman now if he's still around. I wouldn't probably even know what he looks like, but...
That's fair. I probably wouldn't either. Like I said, he would walk, but that does make you wonder, though, like how often you've walked past somebody and you didn't know who they were.
Well, I think I've told the story on here before. I walked past Jerry Hall in Richmond, but not Richmond, Virginia, Richmond, Surrey. And then when I walked past her and I was like, oh, look at that, it's Jerry Hall.
I was going to say, if she was in Richmond, Virginia, no one told me we got problems. But anyway.
I was in Richmond, Virginia 3 days ago.
Oh, yeah. Was it for Hannah's? Wait, no, it wasn't for Hannah's birthday. Why were you in Richmond this time?
Because for Hannah's birthday.
Oh, it was for Hannah's birthday. Okay, I was right then. I didn't think that was 3 days ago. I guess it was 3 days ago.
It was. Well, no, actually it wasn't 3 days. It was my mistake. Time flies forward like you wouldn't believe, Joy. It was actually last week.
That's what I thought. I was like 3 days ago, Tim. I thought her birthday was last Wednesday.
Do you know what it is? Do you this is a question. Do you ever like come home from work or something and then you think to yourself, is this Tuesday or is this Wednesday? Yeah.
All days just melt together at this point for me, Tim. I have no concept of time. Because
I came home and I thought, I think it's Wednesday and tonight is when we record. And I pulled out my phone. I was like, yep, Wednesday. For the minute, I thought it was Tuesday.
Time's a made-up concept, Tim. We made it up. I mean, technically, I guess it's defined by the sun, but someone had to write it all out.
I mean, that's true. But, I do very particular things on every day.
Well, here's the thing, though. Was it Galileo who made the sundial? The Mayans, right?
I think so.
Someone is literally screaming at me right now because all those names are probably wrong. I mean, it all goes back to that guy or girl or whatever.
There's a Mayan historian somewhere out there screaming at their car radio, probably.
I have no clue. Could have been the Greeks. It could have been the Romans. I don't know why I said Mayans or Galileo. Galileo was looking through telescopes. I know that.
Well, it's all related, isn't it? It's where the planets are relative to the sun and things.
This is why me and Tim are into music and watch things like Knight Riders. This is not a science podcast. All right, I'm going to go back to the thing we know, which is music. Okay. So the next one I was talking about was Jody Messina, which was Lesson in Leaving. Now, you may be more familiar with her song, Heads Carolina, Tails California. It's like, Heads Carolina, Tails California, someday. The blah, blah. Have you ever heard that song, Tim?
Well, no, and again, Jody Messina, I don't think it's a name I'd even heard of before. So you have to remember, for one, you know my relationship with popular music. But I mean, this is early 90s stuff. But certainly growing up in England in the 90s and the 80s, there was no country music. I mean,
That's right.
Some people might have liked, Johnny Cash or Dolly Parton or something like that. But there was no outlet to listen to it. There wasn't a country radio station. There wasn't country stuff on TV. It just wasn't a thing. And I remember, when we was playing in cover bands when I first got here, and they're referencing songs from, the 90s sort of pop country, not so much the female fronted, but sort of like Alabama and things like that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I was listening to new music in 1990, and I have no idea about this. I've never heard of this act before. I'd never heard of this song before. And it just didn't break through into the UK at that time. And now it's different. You've got DAB radio, you've got streaming, you've got all that stuff is going on, and there's more avenues to listen to it internationally. And I'm sure folks in the UK now, if they want to listen to 90s pop female-fronted country with red hair, that's a thing, and you can do that if that's what you want. But growing up at that time, Capital Radio in London or Virgin Radio or whatever it wasn't playing this stuff.
Well, and I mean, that's completely why I wanted to do this episode. I was hoping that, in some way, it would be some new songs for Tim to pick up on, or things he could. This is the kind of music that I listened to growing up as a child, because my mother was big into country music. My parents were both into oldies, I don't want to say oldies because that's relative, but they were into Motown and 70s and 80s and 90s music. But my mom was also very into country growing up. So for me, when I hear these songs, it's very nostalgic. It's so interesting. So I was like, I'm going to send this list to Tim so he can get a listen for what I'm going for. But what's very interesting is Tim picked up on a few things. Not only were their looks very similar, every sound of every song was very similar. It's a very popular sound that was happening in early 90s country.
That's true, because I said I had this playlist playing at work in the background. I'd tune in and tune out as I was doing different stuff.
Yeah.
And to some degree, when you hear them one after the other, there's not a lot of difference in it, if I'm being honest. The Shania Twain track, which we're going to come up to in a minute, that you can tell that's different because it has Mutt Lange production. But the rest of them, as I listen to each one in turn, I think, well, is that Winona Judd or is that Joe? It's almost hard to say, because they sing in a similar range. The songs are written very similar, and it has that same production sheen over the whole thing.
It was a very popular sound at that time. And it's my favorite, I guess, sound when it comes to country music. If I have to choose a country song to listen to, there is one song we're going to come on to here that I absolutely don't like. And the only reason I put it on here is because this person was very famous in the 90s and she was part of this kind of thing. And I refuse to put any of her other music. But anyway.
There we go. But I will say, though, this music is very pleasant to the ear. Contemporary country and bro country or whatever you want to call it. Hannah cannot stand it. She utterly cannot stand it.
I can't either.
And the reason she hates it is the way the men in particular sing. It's that kind of twang they have to their voice. And she hears that for about 2 seconds and it has to be turned off. And when I've played in bands that play newer country music, contemporary country music, she's like, what has my life become? You're listening to this stuff. I hate this music.
Well, and maybe Hannah can agree, disagree. I have a theory on that. So there's this type of rock music. It's that alternative, we've talked about it, Creed, Nickelback, Hinder sound that I don't like. Mm-hmm. There's something word I'm not supposed to say on this podcast about it, but it's like the country music like that. It sounds kind of like that, but you add a twang to it and it just makes it worse. Mm-hmm. It's something like you said, you called it bro. There's another word I want to use, but I'm not supposed to because we're PG. But it's that sound. That sound just like grinds my. I don't know. But to be fair, I mean, I'm giving them a hard time because they all sound the same. But we just said all these songs sound the same. So dime a dozen, I guess.
There we are. Or 10 a penny even.
So the next one was we were talking about Jody Messina. It's called A Lesson in Leaving. And she's literally talking to a guy. This is a lesson in leaving, cheating. But what's cool about this song is it's actually a remake. And I didn't know that for a long time. There was an old, I mean, when I say old, I mean early 80s, maybe late 70s country singer. Her name was Dottie West. So think like Patsy Cline time. She did this song originally. And then she was most famous for, she wrote this song, I think, or was co-written or something, but it was her song. She did several hits, like 3 hits with Kenny Rogers.
Oh, okay.
So, and then she did some song called Country Sunshine, which I'm not familiar with, which was her number 1 hit. So Jody Messina did this version. It charted number 2, and it was a tribute to West, who had died in 1991, which is when the song came out.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I mean, I don't know any of the histories of any of these songs. So that's interesting. It has, even like Lesson in Leaving, it has kind of an old-timey country feel about the name.
Well, and I mean, it's Jody Messina kind of has that sound to her. And I mean, the songs like talk about giving somebody a lesson, which I think is a very old kind of country thing. You know, so I'm like going to give you a lesson in losing. But I would say she's got other famous songs that more people would know, but this is just my personal favorite. And I like to know that history of it. It says it was written by her, that Dottie West, and then Randy Gundrum and Brett Meyer. I don't know who these people are. Brett Meyer? Just famous country singers or writers, I guess I should say. All right. This is one that I'm hoping Tim at least recognized the artist. It was Reba McEntire's Take It Back.
Yes, I'm very familiar with Reba McEntire. I have the discography of Reba McEntire in my collection. And she is one of those country artists I feel like Dolly has broken through into, you know, the mainstream, if you will. She doesn't quite have the kudos of Dolly, because at this point, everybody loves Dolly. Dolly can do no wrong, as we've discussed on this podcast. You know, her humanitarian efforts, everything that she does is completely flawless, and no one can ever question anything about Dolly. For me, Reba is like that, but she's like Dolly light. I'm sure she does a lot of good work, and she donates money and raises money for things and does all the great things that Dolly does. But even if she did 1,000 more things than Dolly does, she's never going to have that kudos. I
also think that it helps that Dolly writes her own music. Reba does not. Dolly writes and plays her own music, so...
That would make a lot of sense then. I mean, my favorite Reba song is Fancy.
I love Fancy, but I've heard it so many times that it's kind of one of those ones that I'm like, I love it, but I did want to put it on here because, like you said, it's everybody's favorite. So Take It Back is what's interesting to me about that. So in the music video, and I don't know how much Tim watched the music. I don't even know if Tim watched music because he's working while listening. But in the music video, she's in a courtroom. And there's like a comedian, is it this famous comedian who's playing the judge? And like, it's like a long minute-long trial about, and she's testifying about cheating. And she's like, so if this is how you give me your heart, then take it back. And it is such a sassy song. And that's what I like my Reba. And that's what Fancy works. Reba's a great sassy singer. You put her there, it works so well. And then I always thought it was funny because she gets angry and, you know, she's stomping around the courtroom and she wins the case. But like out of nowhere, it's like these sax players just like start peering out of the court. It's a very funny, it's a very funny video, but it always reminded me of the Billy Joel video, Keeping the Faith, where he's in the courtroom. And he's like, you know, and it's like the musical courtroom is the exact same kind of, and I don't know which one came first because it would have been around the same time, early 90s, but it's the exact same feel, but it's her. And it's a really good video if you've never seen it. But I mean, I love her voice in this one. And like I said, there's also this new song that she did. It's a newer song. I didn't want to put it on here because it doesn't fit the 90s mold, but it was called radio, or you can hear me, or no, turn on your radio. And it was something about like a guy who did a wrong. Well, if you want to hear from me, you can hear me on your radio. But what was interesting is I was watching one of those, like The Voice or something. She was guest hosting. One of the girls, she was with Blake. I think she was with Blake Shelton. She was guest hosting for him. One of the girl who wrote that song came on The Voice and sang in front of her. So the girl was an audition to be on The Voice as a singer, but she had made a bunch of music previously. And Reba didn't know she was going to be there. And so she saw her name and she looked up at Blake. And it was really cool because this girl had wrote that song and got to perform it in front of her. And Reba was like, you wrote my song. And they like went back and forth. It was super cool. And I love that song, but it doesn't sound country at all. It is really just a pop hit with Reba's voice. But
well,
yeah,
I'm sure it probably has a steel guitar somewhere low in the mix.
I'm sure it does, Tim, but that is very much so a pop song with Reba's voice.
I think legally, to make it country, somewhere in the mix has to be a banjo and or a steel guitar, super low down, just about.
So, I mean, to be fair, Tim, I didn't write the book on country, so I can't define that. But I always thought that country was a genre that kind of mixes like blues and church music is where it started.
Sure, I was certainly originally, but you look at something like Jason Aldean, for example, which is a contemporary male country artist. It is nothing but 80s rock.
Oh, it is.
With a fiddle in it, basically. And then he's singing about pickup trucks and dirt roads and buying beer at petrol stations and all that stuff. But it is basically 80s rock. And he was on David Letterman's show performing She's Country, which is actually a really good song, apart from he sings it in that kind of bro country style, so that sort of spoils it. But the actual riff and stuff is good. And his touring band doesn't even have a steel guitar or a banjo in it. It's just a rock band.
I know. Well, I will say, you're probably right. I mean, there's probably someone out there that's defining it. But what's funny is you talk about the lyrics. So we were talking about, the female lyrics versus the men lyrics. And I saw this thing on Facebook and it made me laugh. It goes, why are always the most famous female singers these most intense, like these men did me wrong? And then they're like, but then fast forward and look at the male singers in country and you'll understand why. Look at what they're singing about. And you'll be like, okay, that guy probably did do her wrong.
Well, I never quite thought of it like that because, like you say, the male singers, they're all singing about their trucks and beer and
stupid stuff,
rubbish like that. And of course, the female country singers are going to be complaining about them.
I thought it was hilarious. I read that. I was like, it's true. So,
I mean, they're not complaining that, he doesn't speak Latin well enough or something.
Exactly. All right. This one, I'm glad you at least knew it because it's a favorite. It was The Chicks, and it's There's Your Trouble.
Yeah, so I have the album this comes from, and I've got their most
Wide
recent...
Open Spaces.
Yep, and I also have their most recent album as well, Gaslighter or Gaslight.
Gaslighter. It was named after the song.
Yeah, I have that one too. They are a fantastic band. They're more like a vocal act than a band. I don't think they perform their instruments, but their singing prowess is what they're into.
You are correct and wrong. So the lead singer, what is her name? I can't think of her name.
Natalie Maines.
She normally sings, but she does play the guitar, but she doesn't play it that often. But the two sisters that are behind her, they play like 17 instruments, Tim. Like they play the banjo, they play the violin, you could put a pair of maracas in front of them and they could play them. They're fantastic.
Well, there you go. I just thought they were a vocal act. I didn't realize that they performed some of that stuff too.
The two, what are their? Why can't I think of their names right now? My 7-year-old self is screaming joy. It's Marty and Emily. The two, they're the instrumentalists, and I mean they're like fantastic. They play literally, when I say every instrument, Tim, those people that you think are just virtuosos. I've seen them play everything down to the violin. Just so good.
Well, there we go. I have a sort of claim to fame that isn't that cool about the Dixie Chicks, sort of.
Okay.
So their famous comments about the Iraq War that got them into hot water with
which is nothing compared to what we say now, but anyway.
But at the time that was a thing and they were making comments about the president and all this stuff. That took place at the Shepherd's Bush Empire in the UK in London.
Yeah.
And I went to see Kid Rock
at
the Shepherd's Bush Empire. And I remember when I was there saying to Hannah, I said, this is the place where that whole Dixie Chicks thing kicks off. And she went, that's really interesting. And there you go. That's the only claim to fame I have.
So I will give you guys Joy's history of the Dixie Chicks. Well, I should say the Chicks because they asked you not to say Dixie anymore, and I need to be respectful of that. So this was 1998. So it's a little bit later than the other, but I'm a huge The Chicks fan, like every song they ever did. I literally have had many a nights where I was under the influence and screamed Earl had to die at the top of my lungs. That has happened many times. Sorry, Earl. It's a great song, but yeah. Anyway, so back to what I was getting at, though. I was young. I heard them on the radio because I said I grew up with them, and I was still filling out my like getting my music knowledge down. And I used to go to the library when it was a thing, and you could rent CDs. Mm-hmm. And I rented Wide Open Spaces, and I listened to it probably because I could only have it for like 3 days. I mean, I probably listened to it morning, noon, and night until I burnt that CD out of my CD player because I was obsessed with it. And I was obsessed with their songs and just the way their harmony, their vocals, their everything. And I think they write, or at least they co-write a lot of their songs too. They're somehow involved in the writing process, which we now know, especially if it's modern day, there could be 17,000 people listed. Anyone who possibly hiccuped in the background, you have to list now. But to be fair, I absolutely adored this. And I remember I had to return it to the library, and I returned it for one day, and then I went back and re-got it out. Eventually I went and bought it, but I was young and I was, didn't have my own money to spend. But I will say I held the Wide Open Spaces record of having it checked out for as long in the library as you could.
Well, I can tell you, I have a similar thing. Not with the Chicks, but the library in Hounslow in the Treaty Centre. One for you bingo card version 1 listeners, because I should say that our friend Saz has come out with version 2. I haven't posted it to the social channels yet, but I will, and I've seen it, and it's absolutely fantastic.
I haven't seen it yet. It's going to be news to me too. That's exciting.
Yeah. Version 2 built on version 1, but it's beautiful. So, Saz, thank you. Anyhow, so if you have a version 1 bingo card, Hounslow Library in the Treaty Centre on Hounslow High Street, used to be Treaty Road. You know where that is. Yeah. They had a similar thing where you could rent CDs, records, and I think tapes there. And if I remember correctly, it was 20p for the week, I think.
It was something really cheap. Yeah,
it was something like that. It was enough at the time for me to think I had to choose wisely, because I had to think, well, which one am I going to get? Because, when you're younger, you don't have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And they had, the one I remember getting, the one that really made me excited, was Weird Al Yankovic's album, Even Worse.
Which is fantastic.
And it was on record. And I remember getting it out and listening to, exactly like you, listening to it. And of course, I put it on a cassette tape and then took it back to the library. But I remember how great that was. And it's a shame that these days you can get anything for free wherever, because this kind of stuff where you'd have to hunt it down and it was really important to you is no longer a thing. So you think you paid whatever and you rented that CD from the library of the Chicks, and you listened to it, and you was probably counting down the days till you took it back, and then you took it back to them and you thought, oh, can I get it out another time? And this whole process made that music so much more special to you. And it was the same with Weird Al, because you'd go in there and you go through which one am I going to have, and you pull out the cover and I was like, wow, this is great. And you take it home and you listen to it, enjoy it, even to the point where, you had to put it on a tape. That was the whole thing that, I was going to record it so I could listen to it later. So you had to put the tape and do the whole thing. And now, even these songs that you gave me to listen to, took me 30 seconds to make a YouTube playlist, and it's boom, 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 boom.
It's crazy. So, I mean, and it's those memories. I just seem to remember putting it in the record player, and that album is probably their most famous album. It has so many other hits on it. And then, yeah, that's just where my love probably I liked them before that, but that's what really sold me on them. So that memory is that I will have forever. And I don't know if anybody else in Grayson County tried to get that album out at that time. I'm sorry, I had it probably. If you were trying to check it out. I can tell you, anyone in Grayson County that's interested, go into any Goodwill or thrift shop. There's at least 2 copies of it. I think everybody in Southwest Virginia had that Dixie Chicks album, because it's one that you see in every thrift shop. What can I say? They knew what they were doing. Okay, so this one is a song that comes from a much the next one is Delta Dawn by Tanya Tucker. Now, this one is probably, there's people out there going, what the heck is Joy talking about? Because it's probably one of the more rare songs on this list I gave Tim. It's from the early 70s. I think it was like 71, 72. Tanya Tucker is an amazing singer. She's on that Dolly Romeo one that we talked about, her like Pamela Tillis, Tanya Tucker. She had a few good songs. What's cool about this song, or what I love about this song, is it is built off of, it is virtually identical. And I don't know if you caught on to this, Tim, to Amazing Grace.
It's very similar, yes. It's built on the same chord progression.
Yes, and that's the point. So what it was it's written by former child rockabilly star. I don't know what they mean by that, but Larry Collins. And then the guy who also helped was Alex Harvey. This is what they're best known for. And that's what it was. It was built to sound like that very Southern Belle Christian song. So what I think of when I think of this, and this is for me to tell my memories, is I talked about when we were talking about Tom Jones, we were giving how it kind of had that sound in the last episode before last, whatever episode it was. We were talking about that sound, and I have a very distinct memory. This one I do remember my mom playing for my grandmother a lot when we would come home from church. And I don't think I ever really picked up on that. It was Amazing Grace till recently. I'm like, my grandma would love it. She would sing it. She would clap to it because they always had the Opry on Sundays. Like they had the Grand Old Opry TV show. And so for me, it's a very interesting memory because I remember this song being one of her favorites. And I was like, and then I was sitting there thinking, and I was like, wait a second. No wonder it dawned on me. I've listened to it again. I was like, oh my God, it's literally Amazing Grace. And I'd heard it for years. Have you ever had a moment like that where you've had something for years, Tim, and it finally dawns on you, like something like that? You're like, how did I never notice that?
Yeah, I can't think of an example, but yes, absolutely. Or you hear a song for years and years and years, and then what it's about clicks. Or you hear something that you've heard 100 times, and then you listen to it on headphones, and then you're like, where did that bit come from?
I've done that before, too. Or the first time you hear it in like surround sound or something, and you're like, has that always been there?
Do you know what that's like? It's on Beatles' Sgt. Pepper, When I'm 64. And Paul McCartney sings Grandchildren on Your Knee, Vera, Chuck and Dave. He says grandchildren on your knee in a Scottish accent. Now, Hannah and I were listening to this not that long ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And I said, hang on a minute. So I wound it back. And I said, how long's that been on there? And then she said, oh, is this like the reissued, remastered Giles Martin, whatever? I said, no. I said, this is just a standard one. What? And I'm lucky. I have an original vinyl copy of Sgt. Pepper that my mum bought the day it was released.
Oh, yeah, you were saying that.
1967 or whatever. So we put that on, and guess what? It was there. And it's like, where did that thing come from in this song I've heard thousands of times?
It's crazy. I've had that happen to me. Or you're just sitting there and you're like, I've had songs where, especially with modern day songs, where they like to take samples from songs that, you've heard a billion times. And like, it'll be like a little sample right in the middle. And you're sitting there going, wait a second. And then you play it back. You're like, that sounds familiar. Then you play it back again and you're like, I know what that is. I caught you. I mean, they do it a lot, which, everybody, Tim doesn't have to edit that out. That was Joy hitting the table. She hit her toe.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a live Joy injury on air.
But anyway, so I will say, yeah, that was one of those moments where I was sitting there and I was like, oh, that's why it always makes me think of church and Sunday and my grandmother, because it's literally, and that's why I was always on the Grand Ole Opry and country on Sunday. It's literally Amazing Grace. It's a cool song, though. I like it.
Yeah, and one interesting thing about Tanya Tucker, and this is probably her main claim to fame, I'm sure when she's spoken about, people say, yeah, this is the number one thing about Tanya Tucker, is that she had a song in Knight Rider Season 1 called Can I See You Tonight?
Yes, Tim, that is it. Not her long-standing country music career. It's that moment.
Absolutely not. Actually, looking at my list of songs here, it's song number 4, so it was probably in the pilot, Night of the Phoenix.
Oh, well. Who knew? All right. So this next one is one that I wouldn't be shocked if Tim hadn't heard it or knew about it, which you say maybe it was Memphis and it was Pam Tillis.
Yeah, yeah. Pam Tillis is not an artist I'm familiar with at all.
So she is one of the other artists. Part of the reason that I picked these is when we did that one episode, maybe it was the Dolly episode where we talked about the song Romeo and we talked about all the other women singing in the video with her. Pam Tillis, Tanya Tucker, these are the women. I don't know if you think about that.
Yeah.
That's what they were famous for because it was the early 90s, that sound, which that song, Romeo, has that sound, right, Tim? It's kind of that same kind of play on that. So that's kind of the other reason why I put her in there. But I mean, it's literally just singing about her love and maybe it was Memphis. But it was written by someone else. She didn't write it herself. I was looking that up because I was curious. It says it was first recorded by Phil Seymour, who was the bass player for Michael Anderson. I don't know who these people are, but anyway, if you guys know who they are, great. But she was the only Grammy nominee she had. She wasn't Pam Tillis. That's not Pam Tillis didn't have a whole lot of songs. I'd say she maybe had like a very few. This is probably her biggest song. But once again, it sounds like a pop hit to me, honestly.
Yeah, I think this is one of the ones that I couldn't spot a steel guitar or a banjo in there. This is pure pop 90s. Yeah, it's like 90s pop, but with proper instruments is the best way I can describe it.
And she does play the guitar, but not like she's one of those people that plays the guitar occasionally when they're live. And then like you see pictures of her on her album laying on a guitar or something.
Well, you know, that's a tradition that was started by Elvis because like Elvis would be at the front of the band singing, shaking his hips around being Elvis. But he was not in the band, if you know what I mean, because he was the singer. But the minute he stuck a guitar around his neck and then strummed a chord every 58 bars, he's in the band. And I think that is where a lot of that kind of visual thing comes from. So sure, Pam Tillis may be a great guitar player for all I know. She may be a fantastic guitar player. But she's using it as that kind of prop to say, hey, I'm here. I'm in the band. I'm not just the person standing at the front singing.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So to be fair, in all seriousness, Tim, this is a random fact about Pam Tillis that I thought was incredibly strange. So she had an album that was called I Was Blown Away. It made it to number 16 before Tillis requested that it be withdrawn as a single. This album was named as a single. Basically, she received fans' concerns because it came out right after the Oklahoma City bombing, and they made her rename it, and they named it In Between Dances.
Ooh. So are there copies out there which were printed up and they're probably super rare and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, there are. It came out. It made it to number 16 before they pulled it. So there has to be copies of it out there. But I just thought that was a weird fact about her. I'd never heard that. I don't know the song. I'm just curious how it went from I Was Blown Away to In Between Dances. I probably need to go compare. Like, it's the song about dancing, maybe?
I don't know. Maybe it's one of those albums where the title that isn't actually a song on the album. Maybe it's just a title that was picked out.
It's just random. But anyway, so this one is the one Tim is familiar with, and it is Miss Shania Twain, No One Needs to Know, which is my personal favorite Shania Twain song.
Yeah, I mean, the Shania, she's a fabulous singer. Absolutely. But when you get Shania and you add Mutt Lange, the genius of Mutt Lange and Shania's songwriting and Mutt Lange's songwriting, and you smoosh it all together, you get that kind of Man, I Feel Like a Woman era of Shania Twain. And that stuff is fabulous. I mean, yes, it has country influences. It has a little bit of slide guitar and a little bit of banjo and a little bit of that. But this stuff was huge, and the album this came from was absolutely huge, and it crossed over way into the pop world. Yeah,
this one with The Woman in Me is the album Tim's talking about. This one I've played on Tim Simi played on the ukulele before. I adore this song. It's one of my favorites, and I like it because I love pop Shania. I love Any Man of Mine, Who's Bed Have Your Boots Been Under, all of it. But this song is a little bit more stripped back, and I think it focuses on her vocals, and she has such a beautiful sound that I absolutely adore it. And this one I always think of because it was on that Twister movie. I don't know if you know if that's what the video is from, Tim, or the Twister movie in the 90s.
I didn't know that, but I will say that the songs I listened to, I just pulled the audio. I didn't do the videos because I couldn't watch them because I was working. But I do know about Twister. Twister is interesting because it has a, let's say, sort of unreleased but rare-ish Van Halen track called Humans Being that never appeared on any album. And it also has a track called Respect the Wind, which is only credited to Eddie Van Halen and Alex Van Halen.
I did not know those things. I mean, that's cool, though. Have you ever watched the movie Twister, Tim?
No, I know all this about Twister. I have the soundtrack. I know all this stuff.
To be fair, you're not missing much. I remember I think I watched it when it came out because it would have been late 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all I ever remember is the famous cow scene where the cow gets sucked up in the twister. Oh. That's all I remember. And then I remember this song. I don't know if this song was in it or it was used to promote the movie or what, but this song where she's like, you know how she's sitting in the thing and the wind's picking up and she's playing the guitar and stuff. It's something to do with the movie Twister.
So here's the thing. When did soundtracks change? So you have soundtracks like Flash Gordon, for example, which is the first one that comes to mind for me, which is the entire film story, and it has dialogue excerpts in it. And there's a rich tradition of a lot of them, like the Smokey and the Bandit soundtrack, for example, is exactly the same. At what point did it go from that to these music collections that often say music from and inspired by? When did that become a thing?
I would say probably late 90s, mid 90s, maybe.
Yeah, because like I have, for example, the Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack. And Mission Impossible 2, and funnily enough, is a film I have seen. I've enjoyed that film. There's a helicopter chase in the Channel Tunnel that's utterly ridiculous. But I do like that film. And the soundtrack is first class. And it's all sort of 90s nu metal, heavy rock type stuff. But there's some great tracks on it. But it does say music from and inspired by. So what, did some people watch the film and was like, yeah, I am going to put that Limp Bizkit track on an album? I mean, how does that work?
Tim, I have if I were out here making music soundtracks, I probably wouldn't be on this podcast. I have no point of reference to tell you when this changed.
Yeah, what kind of inspiration are they getting? I mean, I don't know. That's the thing. Can we have some clarity on this?
I don't know, Tim. I have no clue. Okay. So the next one, but if any of our listeners know, please send us a message and we will clarify in the next episode. All right. If we have a famous music soundtrack I don't know what they're called, producer, whatever.
Actually, no, I think I've just got it. I think I know why. So it's a big Hollywood film and it makes lots of money. And they were inspired by that, so they put their song on the album hoping it's equally going to sell a lot of albums, and they were inspired by the cash. I think that's the inspiration, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, Tim, you really knocked it down there. You proved, once again, money rolls the world. Hot off the presses, everybody. We tell you like it's hot. All right, so the next one... Oh, God. Okay, I got to stop laughing. I put this song on here, even though it is not a favorite of mine. I'm not really a favorite of this. It's guys do it all the time, Minnie McCready. Mm-hmm. The reason I put it on here is she has a really sad story, and she probably would have been more of a, long-term, had more songs. People knew her as 90s country because she had a promising career. But unfortunately, at 37, she killed herself.
That's incredibly sad. I really like this song. This was one of the standout tracks on the list. I thought this was a really good song.
Well, that's and to be fair, she did a dance mix of it too. I think the reason that I didn't care for it is I think I got burnt out of it because when it came out, it was like a hit for it's one of those songs, that was a hit for a really long time. And my mom always had CMT on or was listening to it on the radio. So I think I just got part of it. But she has a great voice and she had a lot of potential. And so I included her because she's very likable. She delivers the song very well. It's also that kind of sassy style we were talking about that was popular at the time. But yeah, it was released July 15th, 1996. Let me see when she passed. I'll look up what day it was. Okay, so she passed away. Well, she was 37 in 2013. She apparently died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and she had her mental health had deteriorated for a long time, which is why that was maybe her only real hit, sadly enough. So I wanted to honor her because she did it was a great song, and it was a very popular song during the time.
Oh, well, that's an incredibly sad story. And as I said, I really enjoyed that track. That was one as it was coming around on the rotation of these songs I was into. I thought, well, that's quite a little catchy song. I like that.
Well, apparently she had a history with substance abuse. And sadly enough, in 2009, she was actually on some reality TV show called Celebrity Reality with Dr. Drew. And that just makes me like, ugh.
See, I mean, if people are going through some kind of recovery program, it doesn't need to be on TV. Yes.
And I agree. And then there was something about a boyfriend had died recently. Let me look it up. So on February 17, 2013, McCready's neighbors called the sheriff's office in Arkansas reporting gunshot wounds. McCready was found dead on her front porch with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, the same place where David Wilson, her former boyfriend and father of her younger son, had fatally shot himself 1 month prior. She was only 37 years old.
That's really sad.
So that was the sad part. Like her whole story was really sad. And obviously she was struggling with substance abuse. And then the one person she had in her life did the same. It's very messed up. And basically she rose to fame really quickly. And like Tim says, it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. And it just went downhill from there.
Yeah, very sad. That's a sad tale with someone's life and career ahead of them like that.
So with that being said, the reason I put her on the list was not to make everybody sad, but go listen to it. Honor her. It's a great song.
Yes.
It's not my favorite, but it's a great song. Let's see. I think she would have had more that I really would have liked if she had time. So this one, do you know Trisha Yearwood, Tim? She's married to, do you know who she's married to?
Is it like Blake Shelton or something
Garth
like that?
Brooks.
Oh, yeah.
They were all, she's married to Garth Brooks. And I only recently, so I was watching the Kennedy Center honors for Garth Brooks, which I love. And I didn't know that he actually started out like singing backup and like she was the lead and he was singing like behind. It's really funny. He got his start like working with her. Oh, and wow. I would say he's probably more of a household name than she is now. So it was just really interesting. I had no clue. And they were in a relationship then because, they're both like divorced, I think. And then they got together later. But yeah, he started out his career working with her. And then 20 years down the line, he ends up marrying her.
Wow.
But yeah, she's in love with the boy is probably, one of the, and I love the lyrics because it's like, I always like the part where it says, Daddy said he ain't worth a lick. When it comes to brain, he's got the short end of the stick. I always thought that was funny, but then it was just like, and then she's like, Tommy, she'll follow him anywhere. But it always kind of reminds me of a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, what's the artist who my mind's blanking. Like those, who's that? Oh God, the internet's going to yell at me because I can't think of this guy's name. It's the like the very in the 80s, like, Bob and Sue at the store together. Oh God. Not Summer of 69. That's not what I'm thinking of.
What, Jack and Diane?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to think of. God. Don't come for me. Do you like my description?
It took me a while to see where he was going. There's a little story about Jack and Diane.
Yes, I'm like, not Summer of 69 before someone yells that at me. But that's what this kind of reminds me of. It's got that same kind of, because she's talking about, they'll follow each other anyway. She's in love with the boy, that kind of thing. I thought it was kind of a country version of that similar sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a similar kind of thing. I don't know why I thought that she was married to Blake Shelton. Maybe all these country artists are meddling together in my brain. I don't know.
Well, he's currently married to Gwen Stefani, but he was married to, I think, Miranda Lambert before that.
That's probably where I'm getting it mixed up.
Very different people. Miranda Lambert was much later, but this song came out in 91. But yeah, I mean, I love this song. And I thought, I watched The Voice 3 seasons ago, and Trisha Yearwood and Garth were on there together. And they were wearing like this costume together. I think they were doves or something. And like there's two people singing and it kept throwing everybody off. They sound amazing together though, Tim. If I can find a clip of it, that's what I'll post on Twitter. Like them singing together was like bar none. Perfection.
Now, I have a question for you with regards to Trisha Yearwood. Now, Is she really married to Garth Brooks or is she married to Chris Gaines?
We'll never know. God. Then we went to dinner. Me and my mom and my dad went to dinner, by the way. And by the way, my parents have now said they're scared to talk about things in my childhood because it might end up on this podcast. My dad wanted to clarify my story of me being hit in the head with a 2x4. He says it wasn't a 2x4. It was a much smaller stick. But I said, Dad, I was only 3. It probably felt like a 2x4. Anyway. So the one where I said he was trying to get the thing out of the tree and he hit me over the head with it. My father wanted me to clarify that. So they made the joke. They're scared to say things around because it might end up in this podcast. But we were talking about, and I said, I forgot Chris. I was like, what was his alternate ego's name? And my mom's like, I was like, who is it that had the alternate ego? And Mom's looking at me. She goes, are you talking about Garth Brooks? And I was like, yeah, that's it. So God, it's so weird.
So I got the Chris Gaines album in a thrift shop recently. Chris Gaines' greatest hits. There's so much to unpack with this Chris Gaines story. The fact there was going to be a film, and this was a prequel to the film. It's incredibly complicated. And I still have not been able to find his Saturday Night Live appearance where he appears as Garth Brooks introducing Chris Gaines.
They probably it's
been deleted from the internet. I cannot find it.
Well, he's one of those artists, though. I don't know if you know this, Tim. You can't find his music besides on like Amazon. Like Amazon has all the rights to Garth Brooks music. It's very hard to find his music on YouTube. There's one version of Friends in Low Places that you can find that's really him. But if you click all the other ones, we talk about, the Brothers South singing all of Garth Brooks hits and stuff like that. And there's a bunch of those, but like he has sold all of his music to Amazon, and he takes his copyright very seriously. It'll come right down off of YouTube. I don't know why. I guess he just wants his money. I guess I don't know.
Well, I think country music in particular was one of the last holdouts for physical sales, and even up to maybe 10 or 15 years ago, people who are into country would buy lots of CDs still. And I think maybe it's a hangover from that, where he obviously values his music and values his creative art, as all musicians should. But a lot of them have seen, even the big names have all given up. They're like, I'll just give it to Spotify or whatever. Everyone's doing it. I suppose we're going to have to. But maybe he feels that there's so much worth in his art. He doesn't want it to be cheapened by anyone and their brother uploading it to YouTube.
I mean, I can agree with him. I'm just saying he's one of the ones that I know for sure that he keeps his stuff on lock. Now, Tim, here's the real question. Do you know the third verse of Friends in Low Places?
I do, because I've played it in a band, and I think the mystical third verse was performed.
Okay, fair enough. If you guys have never heard the third verse, go give it a listen. Because I am a huge Friends. So my history with Friends in Low Places goes back. It goes way back, Tim. And I'm going to explain this for everyone who did not go to Grayson County High School. We had a teacher who was a DJ on the side, like one of her jobs was DJ. She's a really good DJ. So she always DJ'd all of our events, like, proms. And, in America, we had a lot of those things going on. You guys didn't. And we would have like pep rallies and things like that. So she would DJ all of them. And she would pick, and this is actually, I did not like her as a person. I thought she was a terrible person, but she was a good DJ. And I think she ended up getting like a DUI after I graduated high school. It was a whole thing. She was just really stuck on the popular kids and like gave them things to the other kids. She was just very, anyway, it doesn't matter. So I won't say her name, but she was a good DJ. But she would do this thing where, depending on what class you were with, like whatever year class you were with, she would pick like songs that she thought would fit your class and would play them at all of your events. So you had like these songs that you associated with that class. And my class, the 3 songs that were, and this is very random, I realize, it was Kung Fu Fighting, Friends in Low Places, and then it was Nitty Gritty Dirt Bands, Fishing in the Dark. Yep. Those are the 3 songs. And so like every event, like our senior year, like when we graduate, everything, those 3 songs always come on. So those 3 songs have a very interesting place in my heart. I've known them for a very long time. How she came up with what 3 songs she was going to give the class, I don't know. And every year she came up with a different one. The other one was Rocky Top, but that wasn't because of her. That's just because that was one of our fight songs for the band. And then cheerleaders had a dance, and they made them play it all the time so they could show off their stupid dance. But anyway, I feel really strongly about that one. But with that being said, so every time Friends in Low Places comes on, it gets me every time. And there was this one night, this was many moons ago when I was much younger and more spry. Me and a couple of friends were drinking, as one does, and Friends in Low Places come on. Well, we turned it up. I mean, we were blaring it, Tim. We were singing it. Everybody was up. Like, there's people dancing. There was people it was just a huge event. Well, it turns out one of our friends Snapchatted to the world. Well, we woke up the next morning not really remembering what happened. And we all woke up to the Snapchat of us. And I mean, when I say, what was it? So two of my friends were on the couch and they were rocking. I was doing a spin across the front of the camera. You just see Charlie jump and then die. And I mean, there's 6 of us, and every single person was doing it. It was like the Charlie Brown dance, but to Friends in Love. And none of us remembered it. And the next morning, we were so sad though, Tim, that he put it on Snapchat, because you know what happens? He didn't save it. It disappeared. We could never see it again. It was the funniest video.
Well, let me tell you, all the things that I did that were questionable or alcohol fueled in my youth, there was no Snapchat. There was no digital cameras. There was no, internet, really. So it happened, and it's in my mind. And if you was there, you was there. And if you wasn't, you missed out.
I mean, to be fair, that one would have been in my mind because I think I blacked out by the time this happened. But, it's fine. It's fine. But yeah, that moment still lives in infamy as one of my favorites because it always gets played for the reasons I was saying. And it's just a classic. I mean, I've literally never met anyone who said they don't like the song Friends in Low Places.
I'll be honest with you. I was not familiar with it until I played it in a band, but I'm obviously super familiar with it now.
I feel like it's probably more familiar in Europe now than it was when you were younger. It's become kind of like a standard, I think.
Sure. I mean, it's hard for me to say. I left England in 2010. Well, actually early 2011. But, I was wrapping up my affairs in late 2010.
Yeah. Well, here's the question for our UK livers. You guys livers, apparently. That one's just let it go.
What, just their livers or their whole bodies?
The livers, the whole bodies. I was going to say, those who live in the UK who listen, not livers, to the podcast, let us know. Because I'd be curious to know, and I'd be curious for you guys to tell me how many of these songs you had heard. And please, 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 for those of you who are not big on country, I'm not big on country music either. I know that this is a controversial topic. Give these a listen. Like Tim said, they're very easy on the ear. I did not put a bunch of dramatic country. I don't think anyway, right, Tim?
No, nothing in here is particularly offensive. And if you have this stuff on and you think, well, this is okay, it's fine. It's not offensive. It's easy to listen to.
It's very radio-esque.
It's very well performed and very, very well played as well.
Thank you. So don't come at this with the biasy. Oh, I don't want to listen to country music, because I promise you it won't be so bad. Though I did give Tim the warning not to listen to this playlist with Hannah because she might not like it.
I on this playlist, these are the ones that Hannah would not have a problem with. It's about Reba, Shania, and that's probably it. Well, actually, maybe the Dixie Chicks.
Okay, fair enough. Which are really the most famous ones. All right. So the final one is the Judds, which is a mother-daughter duo. I don't know how much you guys know. I always want to call them sisters, but they're not sisters. It's actually mother-daughter. So Winona Judd, that did the first song we saw on that, she's the daughter. And then she used to perform with her mother. They're very well renowned in the country world, just known for, they have great vocal range. Mm-hmm. They're known for having extremely well done vocal range, rhythm. So the song Why Not Me is just a very classic Why Not Me, about love. And this is their second number one country chart. So I think it's one of the ones they're more famous for, which is why I put it on there. But you may have heard, there's one called Mama, He's Crazy. It's once again about me. Seeing a trend here, Tim. But yeah, they and then once they kind of broke up, Winona went on her own and had a mild kind of I guess you could say career. She didn't have a whole lot, but she did quite a few songs. But she's they're one of those people though that they have a following. You know how you talked about your friend who was obsessed with the Allman Brothers? Was it the Allman Brothers?
Allman Brothers, yeah.
Yeah. So they're one of those people that have kind of a cult following, though. And when they perform live, they still sell out arenas because there's a very distinct amount of people who absolutely adore them. And it's because when they sing live, their voices are like pitch perfect. I mean, like there's no need to alter their voices in any way. I think they both play guitar. Like they're just musically very talented. And if I remember right, so my claim to fame with Winona Judd, I do have my own. Tim is not the only one who brushes hands around here with celebrities. As an exacto member of ABBA. When I went to the Women's March, which I've told you many times, I could not see the stage. All I could hear was the stage because I couldn't move. Winona Judd was one of the ones speaking when I went by. I heard her and I heard Madonna. So there you go.
I mean, effectively, you're in the band, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And I mean, they wouldn't sing. Yeah, they would totally. Sadly, they would sing. I think "Loops Around Me," Tim, because when I say their voices, and I think Naomi was her mom's name. Sadly, I think she got. I don't know if she's passed away, but I know she had hepatitis. Yeah. And they did like reunion tours. Oh, Love Can Build a Bridge. Have you ever heard that song, Tim?
Yes, I have heard that song.
That's them.
Okay.
So that's probably their number one hit, I would say. But thankfully they were introduced into the Country Music Hall of Fame. But I don't know if Naomi's still alive, but I heard that it was like affecting her ability to sing because of the hepatitis.
Oh, that's a shame. There is some great harmony work on this track. I will say that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're into like really, because they say family members harmonize well, and don't get me started. I hate the idea that in this Tim knows what I'm talking about. There's two different types of people in the world. There's people who think that harmonizing is just two people singing together and sounding well. And there's two people who think of harmonizing as an actual musical practice you do where you're both singing the same notes, different, like there's a whole thing. They do the second one. I hate whenever someone's like, oh, they sound really good together. They're harmonizing. That's not the same thing. So when I say that, I mean, like they actually, they sound good together because their voices are very similar in mother-daughter duo, right? But they also are very technically good at harmonizing.
Yeah, I've been in bands where someone goes up to do the harmonies and no, it's just the same thing.
Yeah, you actually, there's a lot of work that goes into harmony. It's not like, and that's not to say it sounds bad. It's just not harmony. It's just singing. You're just singing in unison. So I get so frustrated. I'll be watching something or hearing something, be like, oh my God, do you hear how well they're harmonizing? I'm like, what harmony are you talking about? I didn't hear any harmony. And proper harmonization, it stacks on top of each other. It gives you a vocal sound that kind of, I don't know, if you hear it, you know it, right, Tim? Like it's two notes that are stacked right on top of each other that make a beautiful unison sound that you don't get just regularly singing. It's the best way I can explain it. So anyway, that's what I was getting at. So I included them because she had the red hair and I had to keep up with the
the picture I have of them too, the mother and the daughter both have the red hair.
They do.
They look alike. They have the same hairstyle, which is a lot of hair and a lot of hairspray. And they're both wearing exactly the same red lipstick. So, I mean, they could be twins from this picture. It could be a mirror. Maybe there was only one Judd and a mirror.
It's fair. Well, to be fair, she is still alive. I just looked, though. She's still out there rocking her red hair. I just looked it up while we were talking. But yeah. They sold like millions upon millions of albums, but I feel like they were one of those bands that like, artists that have like a hot of fame for like 5 minutes and they just kind of drop off. That's what I associate with them. But it does say they won 5 Grammy Awards.
Oh, wow.
There you go. The Judd sisters. My mom would probably be screaming at me, "There's so much they were." She probably knows like 74,000 other songs that they sang that I'm aware of. And I'm totally giving them or honoring them. But yeah. So, Tim, if you had to pick one song on here that is not Shania, that is not the Chicks or Reba, that you would tell anyone to listen to, which one would it be?
I liked that Mindy McCready song, Guys Do It All the Time. That's the one that actually caught my attention out of all of those. Though, even though you've told me I can't have Shania, it's got to be Shania because it's Mutt Lange production and it's Shania and it's fabulous. I know, and I keep thinking we need to do a Shania episode, so I'm saving all that for when I run out of ideas. Well, if you do a Shania episode, don't forget it won't impress me much. Wow, Tim. Lord. I was watching a thing where they're asking her, when she's wearing the cheetah print in the desert,
and she's got the box was her shoe box. So like the shoes that she was wearing, but that was the box they came in. And so but they were asking her, well, we want to know what's in the box. She's like, nothing. It was just shoes that I took the shoes out and I'm wearing them. Oh. What's the shoe box? She also says that she hates her legs and that's why she always showed her stomach. There you go. Learn that from Shania.
There we are.
Anyway. All right, Tim. Well, I'm glad I could introduce you to at least one song that you liked. And I hope it wasn't completely terrible to listen to.
No, nothing on this list was terrible to listen to. It was a nice listen, but I said that one track was the standout for me.
Well, there you go, Tim. If you find a Minnie McCready album at the thrift store, it's going to be rare considering I think she only had one album. So you better buy it up quick.
If I see it, my crispy dollar bill will be waiting for it.
All right. Well, that's everything I have for you. Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.
To find me out another day to